Turn now to Ms. Khalid. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here today. Commissioner, I'll start by asking, have you heard of the Conservative opposition motion that was passed on June 10th, was presented on June 6th of 2024 in the House?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware what the motion you're referring to.
So this motion required a production of documents from the government, the Auditor General, SDTC, to be presented to the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Council with the intention of providing these documents to the RCMP. Now, in a recent letter that was to this committee, the RCMP commissioner sounded the alarm, saying that this House order, which is this motion I'm referring to, is interfering in operational and police independence. This is happening in a free and fair society like Canada. Commissioner, have you ever seen instances where the legislative branch tried to interfere or direct police as to how to do their jobs?
No, I am not aware of any such instance.
And how do you feel about that interference?
You know, are you asking me to comment on the on the behavior of Parliament? I'm a servant of Parliament. I do what you direct me to do. It's a bit hard to suggest that asking me to say whether there's a motion passed by Parliament was appropriate or not. Obviously, the Commissioner of the RCMP feels it's not proper under the circumstances. And, you know, if he will have good reasons for explaining, and I presume you should ask him rather than me about this.
Commissioner, respectfully, I do believe that even though you're an employee of Parliament, you have a very, very important responsibility to be hands-off, to be independent of the actions of Parliament. In fact, you oversee a very important aspect of what parliamentarians do. Now, the Auditor General was recently in the news saying that this specific Conservative House motion would compromise her independence. Commissioner, what's your reaction to hearing a fellow officer of Parliament sound the alarm that parliamentarians are putting her work and her office in jeopardy?
Well, obviously, it's of concern. I mean, the whole way why we set up these various offices are to be independent of any politics and to come up with the facts and present them to the public and inform the public of what's going on, and if there's any misdeeds or anything that is shouldn't have done, to expose it. And anything that's done to interfere with the independence of this and put in question any report that's issued by one of these offices defeats the whole purpose. I mean, you are independent. That's why you are trustworthy. You're not influenced by outside influences. You're not. You have to be. What you have to do is find the facts and expose them, and that should be done as without any interference from Parliament.
Now, is it usual practice for an officer of Parliament to raise alarm bells like this, in your experience?
I'm not aware that, personally, I'm not aware of that it has been done before. It may have been. I haven't researched the issue.
I mean, it is, as you said, Commissioner, quite alarming that parliamentarians would interfere with the work of independent office holders that are there to provide scrutiny. So, it is quite troubling in my point of view. Now, the government has addressed the situation that we're talking about today, which is what I think Canadians expect of our government, but that doesn't quite suffice for the cons, because what matters most for them is to create chaos. And Mr. Poilievre and his cons, they thrive in chaos. They need to create it everywhere that they go, and in turn, they look to hurt trust in our institutions, including your office, Commissioner. So when they use the House to direct or to seek influence police in this country and compromise officers of Parliament, they're looking to hurt the trust in the institutions that they one day will seek to govern. Commissioner, in your view, what is the long-term damage that is being done to Parliament and to institutions based on this conduct?
Asking me to make a political judgment. I'm sorry, I cannot do that. You're basically suggesting that the action of your opponents are undermining the system and will cause damage in the long term, and I want me to agree. That's for people. That's for you to judge as the electorate, not for me.
I'm afraid that is the time. Beginning our third round, Mr. Brock, I believe you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Commissioner, and welcome, Council. It's always good to see you back. I guess the first concern that I have is I'm quite astonished of the commentary from my colleague, Ms. Khalid, in terms of her interpretation of a demand for documents as saw fit by a majority of members of Parliament. And as you will agree with me, I'm sure, Mr. Commissioner, that Parliament is supreme. Committees are supreme. And we can just about order anything we want unfettered. Absolutely. In fact, the House of Commons top lawyer basically affirmed that position, that documentation needed to be produced to get to the bottom of yet another scandal by this corrupted Liberal government under Justin Trudeau. So perhaps Ms. Khalid needs to be informed that simply obtaining documents and forwarding those documents to the RCMP is not and never would be seen to be interference. It aids in their investigation. She is somehow suggesting, wrongly and deliberately wrongly, that by asking and furnishing documents to the RCMP, we are directing an outcome, which you know, Commissioner, is completely ridiculous. The RCMP are completely independent and are unfettered in their decision to lay charges or not. You'd agree with that?
Yeah.
Regardless of what Parliament said, regardless of what Justin Trudeau may have said, they have that final discretion. So Ms. Khalid needs to be educated on the powers that the RCMP actually have. But a broader concern I have is this. Really, why are you here, Commissioner? As much as I enjoy listening to you and listening to your counsel, you were selected and you were chosen to come here by the Liberal Party. And right out of the gate, they asked you questions about your mandate as if they didn't even know why you were here. As we well know, and you can confirm, Commissioner, there's at least a dozen other investigations into this Arrive scam scandal, including the Auditor General and the RCMP and numerous colleagues of your level, various commissioners actually examining this scandal. Why weren't they here today? But they chose you. You made it clear to this committee earlier this year that you have no mandate with respect to the Arrive scam, do you?
I don't. And my opening statement today made that absolutely clear.
Made it abundantly clear. So this is now twice you've made it clear you have no mandate. Yet the Liberals wasted this committee time and wasted your time, sir, from doing the good work that you are obviously doing throughout the year. How much time do I have?
Mr. Brock, just hold. I want to just push you back in your lane. The witness is here, the invitation of the full committee. So I appreciate you're welcome to raise his relevance, but he is a committee witness. So just to nudge back in, if you could, on that. There are no
certainly. Yeah,
I appreciate you've got a minute 45 left.
Okay, so let's get to your report, the Verschuren report. We've heard from my colleague, Mr. Perkins, that she somehow benefited from the decision making that she either made or abstained on voting but not recusing herself, upwards to $10 million. You found her guilty of breaching two aspects of the Act. I want to know, and I'm sure Canadians watching this want to know, what is the penalty for her?
The penalty for her is, as the Act provides right now, basically exposure. She
Sorry?
is exposure.
Exposure.
Yeah, you know, or if you
Name
want,
and
if you
shame.
want, you had a conflict of interest. If we expose it, you get it certified. It does damage to your reputation. That's how the Act works. The Act does not have any penalties, except for minor penalties on reporting things, and the consequences are. To obviously, if the person who appointed her, she has resigned. But if not, for instance, one option it would have been for the government to ask her to resign, etc. If they felt the breach that we pointed out was severe enough, etc. As my colleague pointed out, we went through every single vote of hers. So these allegations that are here that she supposedly voted on issues of up to $200 million to the benefit of her, etc. As I say, we looked at every vote that she did, and she recused herself when required. At least that's the evidence, Michael, if you want to elaborate on that. But so the whole focus was the emergency votes. That's what Mr. Barrett's letter asked me to look at, and we looked at. And in the process, we also looked at votes that she did with regard to incubators, and we found that she violated. She should have recused herself, not abstaining, because there's no provision for abstaining in the Act, except if you're a member of Parliament voting something on a minister. So here we find it is the whole process is essentially, if you want to put it bluntly, is we investigate, we expose, and to some extent we do damage to your reputation. That's all we can do. The person who appointed, we're talking about a reporting public office holder, whoever appointed them can decide if they want to do other actions.
Meanwhile, the
I'm
taxpayer is
afraid
out
that
$10
is the
million.
time, Mr. Brock. Trinidad, Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank you for correcting the record earlier when Mr. Brock was claiming that we had called the witness and we were wasting time and we were having these meetings that is wasting members' time. Thank you for correcting that record, because as a member of Parliament, as someone who takes this committee very seriously, to see it being used time and time again to push the conservative narrative, a false narrative, a narrative which is going down rabbit holes and witch hunts and God knows what else is going on, not allowing the duly appointed independent officers of Parliament to do the jobs that they have to do. Because if it was the case that those officers of Parliament, of which I'm very glad to see the Commissioner here for conflict of interest and ethics, if they were not doing their job, then indeed parliamentarians would be called into action. But when they are doing their jobs, the RCMP, the Auditor General, anyone else that is doing their investigation, we must let them do their work. And I want to read out now, for the record, from the letter from the Commissioner of the RCMP. And this is the letter, Chair, that we were sent July 25th. It's a letter that is directed to the law clerk, Michelle Bedard. The RCMP has reviewed the implications of the motion. This is the motion of June 6, in a potential criminal investigation. Before taking any investigative steps to access documents that may give rise to a reasonable expectation of privacy, the RCMP must comply with the applicable legal standards to preserve the viability of any potential criminal investigation or prosecution. The Parliamentary Production Order does not set aside these legal requirements. The Parliamentary Production Order does not set aside these legal requirements, I repeat. For the reasons set out above, the RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is therefore highly unlikely that any information obtained by the RCMP under the motion where privacy interests exist could be used to support a criminal prosecution or further a criminal investigation. How much time do I have, Chair?
2 minutes, 2 minutes, 20 seconds.
Excellent. I continue. Given the risks associated with receiving information under the motion or other compulsory authorities, practices need to be put in place to identify the nature and the source of the information, with a view to determining whether it contains charter-protected information. Charter-protected information. Any information obtained through the motion or other compulsory authorities would need to be segregated from an RCMP investigation. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. I'm going to repeat that again, Chair. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention of normal investigative processes and charter protections. The RCMP will continue its review of available information, so on and so forth. I'd like to hear the Commissioner's views on what I just read out.
Look, if the Commissioner states the law, and so it points out that there could be possible challenges based on the Charter, which is a fact, you know, whether there will be or not, etc., without anything more. I think nobody can argue with him that Charter comes first, and we have and if you have information that you garnered in an investigation and that was furnished here, etc., you have to be very careful for how you use it and when and where and how. And I mean, I think he is, as far as I can, from the letter that you just read, seems to me, it's just pointing out there's normal legal concerns.
Well, thank you for that, Commissioner. And yes, indeed, the government has taken corrective steps in order to ensure better oversight and accountability to the personnel and finances of STCDC, because, yeah, stuff happens. Stuff happens, and we need to have the processes. We need to have the processes in place in order to investigate and to make corrective action, which has been done in this case by transitioning this program to the National Research Council.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan.
But we're not looking for solutions here, are we? We're just looking to muck rack.
We will certainly come back to this. I expect suivant, c'est madame. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, Chair, I just want to take a minute to just quickly respond to Ms. Shanahan's very animated opinions on what Parliament can and can't do. So a majority of members of the House of Commons passed a motion. And so that's important. A majority members of the House. So the Liberals want to act like they have a majority, but certainly they don't. And a majority of members saw the corruption of this Liberal government and passed this motion. And the motion calls for documents to be sent to the RCMP. And Ms. Shanahan read a letter, and I just want to share from the Parliamentary Legal Counsel a quote from his letter to the Speaker of the House of Commons. The power to send for documents is absolute and unfettered, period. It is a constitutional parliamentary privilege not limited by statute. As such, the House is not constrained by statutory obligations contained in legislation such as the Access to Information Act, the Privacy Act. I also note that the order did not contemplate that redactions be made to the document or that information be withheld. It's without limit. It's absolute. So they may not like it, and they certainly don't seem to understand it, but it's the law. And a majority of members of the House who were democratically elected made that decision. Now, we know that their Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, favors a dictatorship, but that's not how our system works. Now, the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police does report to a minister in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, as per Section 5 of the RCMP Act. But the RCMP, of course, has full and final discretion on the investigations that they launch. But that's not going to stop Parliament from doing its job. We'll make the information available. The RCMP can choose to investigate or not. But much to Mr. Trudeau and his Liberal members here's chagrin, this is democracy, not a dictatorship. A majority of members of the House made a decision, and they can call independent officers of Parliament here to get them to opine on it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's legal, it's the right thing to do, especially after 9 years of the most corrupt government in history, and that's what we have with these members in that Liberal government.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor again for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And wow, this is very interesting. If the Conservatives were not so obsessed by pursuing their own convoluted conspiracy theories, narratives, attacking members of Parliament, especially members on this committee at every turn, we see that the partisan objective of the members who are making these accusations, and it is when we're all big boys and girls, and we can all play in that arena, but when it involves independent officers of Parliament, and we just heard the Commissioner saying that he is disturbed when he hears of fellow independent officers raising the alarm that their work is being interfered with or could be compromised, then I think we need to take heed. We need to take heed. And indeed, I want to finish with the letter that I was reading earlier from the RCMP Commissioner. The RCMP will continue its review of available information that does not give rise to concerns under the Charter to determine if sufficient evidence exists to launch a criminal investigation. I would like to emphasize as well that the RCMP is operationally independent and strictly adheres to the principle of police independence. In a free and democratic society, this ensures that the government cannot direct or influence the actions of law enforcement and that law enforcement decisions remain based on the information and the evidence available to police. Am I to infer by the comments of the members of the Conservative Party that they would interfere with police investigations? Because that is what I am hearing. Puis je veux continuer en français parce que...
And I will continue in French because I know that the people in my riding are very concerned about what is going on. So when you look at the letter from the RCMP sent to Michel Bédard, who is a legal officer, so it says the RCMP also looked into allegations of potential criminal misconduct in order to launch an investigation and have access to documents within a reasonable time frame. And the RCMP has to abide by the applicable legal norms when it comes to the feasibility of all investigations. And the parliamentary request for the production of documents does not change that obligation. Therefore, the RCMP has the capacity of receiving and utilizing information and documents obtained in this manner as part of criminal investigations to respond to concerns and compliance in line with the Charter. So the information collected by the RCMP is collected in line with regard to privacy considerations as well. And I will continue with the paragraph in the last line. There's a significant risk that the motion be interpreted as a derailment of the regular procedure. The RCMP will need to determine if there's sufficient evidence to launch criminal investigation. And I would like to underline also that the RCMP is independent from an operational point of view and adheres strictly to the principles of independence of the police force. In a free and democratic society, this principle has to be guaranteed so that the government cannot intervene in these processes and that the processes should remain founded on the evidence. So that, Chair, is very important to take into account, and for us as parliamentarians. Unfortunately, we have seen this elsewhere before. The quest for scandals by the opposition is so partisan that it risks really undermining all the good practices when it comes to these types of investigations that we have had here at the Parliament and at all the other institutions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Fourth and final round. Mr. Brock, you have the floor. I understand you might be sharing your time. Would you like me to let you know when you're halfway, or are you going to hand it off?
Halfway.
Very good.
I'll start by saying I'm on behalf of the Conservative Party, I'm just so sorry that we have offended Ms. Shanahan in our job in terms of holding this government to account and discovering and exposing corruption at the highest level. So if that's offensive to her, well, then so be it. That's our job.